Ladies and gentlemen, today we're going to be diving deep into one of the most interesting pieces of content that I have seen on Netflix. We actually ended up checking out this with my fiance over the weekend, and that show is called Killer Sally. Now, we're going to be diving into the different aspects that I definitely observed along the series. Again, I don't have every single piece of evidence that there is available. Obviously, that the show is going to portray him and warp around the case in order to make the show more exciting, but that does not defer the conversation from happening as to how some of these cases are treated out there and you know what the general trend has been. Because I feel like that was one of the main mentionings in the show, was that you know, through time, even though the court system and the legal system have evolved in some aspects, I don't think that this is one of them. You know, the case regarding self-defense and abuse and things like that. So let's go ahead and get that right into just the overview of what Killer Sally is. For those of you that have not checked out the show and would like to go ahead and save it, you guys are more than welcome to. But Killer Sally is the story between Sally and Ray McNeil. There were two bodybuilders that ended up meeting in the military when both of them were in the Marines. The story kind of goes through Sally's development in the Marines and how she decided to go into bodybuilding as a potential hobby, because she figured that since she was one of the smaller members of the military, especially of her group, she decided to become bigger to be able to defend herself and to be able to, you know, have more of an identity within her group. So she picked up on bodybuilding and started getting stronger on that, and a lot of her actual leaders within her, you know, within her department started seeing that she was kind of taking this seriously, and they encouraged her to start, you know, participating in some local tournaments at the amateur level. And they also introduced her to Ray McNeil, who was also another member of the Marines, who was also into the bodybuilding scene. So that's how they met. That's how they were able to connect. They found that they had a lot of things in common, and therefore, you know, they decided to kind of go along with it. So essentially, one of the major aspects that we dive into is that bodybuilding in general, starting back in the 70s, bodybuilding wasn't necessarily seen as like a very developed sport. You know, it wasn't until Arnold Schwarzenegger came into the picture that people actually started taking bodybuilding a lot more seriously, because he definitely defined and he revolutionized the way the bodybuilding is treated and the way the fitness was seen in the 70s and early 80s. He was basically like the face of what you could be if you dedicated and you went hardcore into fitness and nutrition and everything else. So Arnold, you know, he's known for winning like 6 Mr. Olympias, I believe. So he was essentially just the face of bodybuilding at the time. And it took off into a series where a lot of people picked it up as a hobby, and they decided to start participating in the Mr. Olympia competitions that came around. So Ray ends up getting more into it. I think he ends up deciding to go pro, and he decides to leave the military in order to pursue this dream of bodybuilding and making it a profession. The thing about bodybuilding, though, is that like they explain it in the show, unless you're like one of the major winners of the competitions, or unless you're basically, you know, crushing everything out there, and you're getting your face out there and everything, and you know, you're just like the absolute picture of fitness, no one really takes you seriously at the pro level. So people have to push themselves super hard all the time. People have to get in there, and people have to continue to evolve the way that they portray fitness, nutrition, and bodybuilding to even have a chance to compete at the major level. It so turns out, if I go ahead and present you guys with a little bit of evidence pertaining to this. So even nowadays, when you go and take a look at some of the stuff, you know, they have a bunch of articles on how you could potentially make money if you decide to go into bodybuilding, because bodybuilding itself does not really pay the people that end up making it below 5th place. And here in this article, I read through a good chunk of it, and essentially you end up going into at the pro level. You have the pro building market, which again is super vast at this point. A lot of people have picked up on, you know, nutrition, like the knowledge of nutrition and the way that you can work out and the way that you can maximize your gains and everything else. The amount of information that is out there nowadays to pursue this as a hobby, it has significantly expanded. You know, it wasn't like before in the 80s where you didn't have this access to this information, and where maybe you could make an argument that the info was a lot more internal to the people that already were familiar with the profession. And like you can see in this article by Natural Flex. So if you start looking from the 5th place all the way down to 1st, 5th place, which was Raleigh Winkler, he ended up winning like 40 grand in the competition. Dexter Jackson won 45 grand, you know, and you continue to just amount the winnings that you can take from participating in a competition. I think this one was the Mr. Olympia that ended up giving this winnings, you know, like you look at some of these physiques, man, and it's crazy, like just how you know defined everything is, and like the amount of seriousness that the profession is taken with. The 1st place, which was Brandon Curry, ended up taking like around 400 grand in terms of winnings from the bodybuilding competition. We dive a little bit deeper because bodybuilding has never been taken. Again, it's kind of like an interesting sport because people kind of see it as like a hobby. I don't think people really consider it to be a sport. You know what I mean? Like it's not one of those things that you can say that people really get into because they want to get, you know, to the top of like the performance spectrum. I think bodybuilding mainly focuses on, you know, being able to tone the body and being able to show every single aspect of you know, of your muscular formation and everything. Vince McMahon, actually, I didn't even know this. This was interesting to read into, but he actually ended up trying to develop the World Bodybuilding Federation as a way to actually bring in some of these bodybuilders and give them some sort of a salary, you know, in order to develop a league where they were, you know, focusing on bodybuilding and working out. This didn't actually end up taking off anywhere at all. I don't think that this was particularly successful. But it kind of opens the door into the conversation regarding just how little some of these bodybuilders get paid and how you have to find other methods to really fund your dream. You know, the way that it works is you have to enter at amateur levels to start gaining popularity and start gaining notoriety, and then at some point you decide to jump into the pro levels of it. Now, this just kind of goes into a deeper level into, you know, amateur competitions and everything else. But the overall thing that I wanted to show you guys is that, hey, like if you're not in the top 5 or if you're not in some of the top spots, you get nothing out of the competition. So you could have spent an entire year, an entire 2 years, you know, working out and doing this, and definitely not have gotten anything out of there. So we dive into another article which dives into 6 ways that you could make money in the fitness industry. And so it kind of dives into different things that you could do, like personal training. You could start a sponsorship, you know, although sponsorships for fitness and bodybuilding are actually very, you know, they're very competitive because there's not a lot of them out there. The main overall point is that in order to support this hobby, in order to support bodybuilding, a lot of people that are doing it out there have to have, you know, secondary and tertiary sources of income in order to keep supporting everything that it really takes to get to that level, you know. So we won't be diving super deep into this article. This one was by Muscle and Fitness, which kind of dives into the whole bodybuilding scene and things of that sort. But I think that the reason why I wanted to bring this up is that it connects to the overall show and the narrative that, hey, some of these bodybuilders are not really making a lot of money out there, you know. Like it actually does take an additional source of income to really get anything into your pockets. So one of the main questions is, should the system be set up for competition winners to be the only people that are benefiting financially from you know, bodybuilding? I think one of the main aspects that is focused on the show is the fact that you know, Ray actually did win a Mr. Olympia competition, but the notoriety from Mr. Olympia only occurs throughout an entire year. So it's kind of like if you win the Miss Universe competition, you get a lot of notoriety. You're like the face, you know, you're like the representation for a year. And then once the competition restarts, that crown is taken away from you unless you win it again. Which beyond Arnold, I don't know that there's a lot of bodybuilders that have really won the Mr. Olympia that many times. You know, I think Arnold is the one that has won it the most times. It's just tough, man. The level of competition to win a Mr. Olympia is really high, and it takes a lot of dedication. So essentially, so Ray decided to go into it at a pro level. Sally didn't go into it at a pro level. I don't think, because she definitely, you know, the way that the women's bodybuilding scene has also evolved in parallel with the men's. Has followed a trend where it's just significantly more competitive as well. You know, like the introduction of chemicals into the body in order to enhance, working out and achieving that level of just muscle toning and complexity, has definitely gone up. So because of the fact that he had gone pro, the show kind of dives a little bit into how Ray built this kind of, I would call it an ego, but it was more of like he built this image that, hey, I'm the person that's focusing on this at a professional level. I'm the person that's actually bigger. I'm the one with the bigger physique. So therefore, he wanted Sally to stop, doing bodybuilding and just focus on supporting him in his path to bodybuilding. So Sally was the one that was paying all the bills. The show goes into detail about how she started making wrestling videos, because she started joining some of these companies. So back in the 80s, I don't know what it was, but there was like a fad where when you saw strong women out there going into bodybuilding competitions, that there was like a section of men that actually had a fetish for women, wrestling them and physically dominating him. And Sally actually got into that section of revenue making, because she was also doing competitions to see who could lift the most and who could do the most reps. So she was doing anything that she could in order to bring money into the household and keep food on the table, and also keep supporting Ray. It goes into detail that in one instance, she paid like $24,000 or $26,000 in a single year just to keep supporting his dream of bodybuilding and everything that he had to do. So nowadays, like you guys just saw in the articles, I don't think that there's, there are opportunities out there for you to make money in the bodybuilding industry. But just based on some of the stuff that I was reading into, I didn't pull up all of the articles that I looked through. But there's just a bunch of alternatives that you can take in order to make money, because I don't think that bodybuilding really is one that you can rely on. In a way, I see it comparable to the streaming business and to the content creation business, where I don't think that you can fully rely, for example, on Twitch income, on people giving you donations and being able to support you with with bits and subs. You got to find other avenues of revenue that can support that content creation path that you're going to pursue. And it is also extremely competitive to be a content creator. In a way, it's very comparable to bodybuilding. The differences are that bodybuilding worries about the, just like the presentation of the physique and how deep you go into it. And then content creation focuses about the presentation and the entertainment value that you provide to a viewer. You know what I mean? So we move on from just that aspect. It kind of dives deep into how they got started as a couple, how they got into bodybuilding. It kind of explains, hey, this is how they ended up, with Ray going pro, with Sally being the provider in the household and being the one that went out and got a bunch of different jobs, and she was the one supporting the household. So in general, the main trend that we start to notice is that there was a very toxic relationship between Sally and Ray. I think at one point Sally mentions that in the third day that they had been married, it was the first instance that Ray actually physically assaulted her. I believe that he punched her in the face, I believe is what it was, what she portrays in the documentary. And it just became like this cycle of Ray just taking out his anger and taking out his frustrations on Sally at home, because when you start looking at all the testimonials from a lot of Ray's friends and people that spoke in the show, you start to see that a lot of them had a very positive overview of Ray. He was like the perfect person. He was never angry. He was very friendly. You could like go and talk to that man, and he was open. Although some of them do recognize that Ray had a very short fuse, which kind of correctly translates to what was going on at home behind the scenes, where he would go home and he had these episodes of just violence against Sally and his family, and there's multiple examples that are given along the show where you can see all of these things just kind of connecting into what Sally and Ray kind of went through, through their childhoods, because it is also revealed that Sally and Ray also did grow up in their households, with abuse. So In the show, there is one example of one of the family friends, one of Ray's friends that was also, friends with Sally at the time, where he says that Sally wanted him around at home because she felt like with him around, there was like a sort of peace that could be achieved in the household. So basically, it kind of still connects with the fact that, hey, Ray was not known to be like a violent, like an abusive person outside of the household. But when he went back behind the scenes, all of these things were happening, and and it was like a repetitive cycle of things that people were going through. Karen, thank you so much for the resub. I do really appreciate you, buddy, man. I don't know why the notification didn't pop up, but I really appreciate you for the sub, man. Thank you so much. It's kind of weird. Let me go see if the I'll have to look into that. But thank you so much, buddy. Really appreciate you. Fuck, damn, man. Did you make it back home, by the way? Let me know if you're back home already, my dude. So I don't think that as you watch the show that you can build a full profile that Sally was the only since Wednesday night. Oh, gotcha. Okay, so you just made it known just now through the notification. I got you, buddy. Yeah, man, you're almost at a year, bro. Holy crap, man. You're gonna be the first person to reach a year of supporting the channel, man. Really appreciate you, buddy. So Sally, there are multiple cases that are brought up where Sally was known to be a violent person as well. Like it wasn't that Sally didn't have instances of violence popping up. There are a couple of instances that were documented where, in one of them, one of the neighborhood kids was bullying her kid, and her kid finally rebelled, and and it kind of led to the neighbor, I believe, like he smacked the kid or something, and then like Sally went over to the neighbor's house, and she just started fighting the neighbor and like beating him up, and it was these outbursts of violence that could also be seen from Sally. But Sally was always pretty caring towards her children. I don't think that they ever talked about an instance where Sally ever did anything to her kids, which was not the case with Ray. Ray definitely had, Varder is over here with the jump screens. Ray definitely, there are a few accounts where the kids definitely do portray, some of the instances of abuse that Ray did against them, And again, we kind of go back to the fact that Sally and Ray both ended up going through abuse as they grew up. Sally, at one point in the series, mentions that she actually thought that abuse was normal in a relationship, that she thought that abuse within a married couple was something that you could just expect, because she had just been exposed to this level of abuse as she came up and grew up, that, in her mind, it was just a normal. And I believe she started having PTSD episodes of just the instances where she just started going through the abuse, and it just kind of became like a PTSD kind of thing, So it was just really, really interesting. And another thing to mention is that Sally does mention that she got fully vested into Ray just 100%. So basically, she gave out her heart to him. She was willing to support him 100% through his profession, which was bodybuilding. She was willing to do anything to support Ray's dream of becoming a bodybuilding champion and continuing to do that. And that was the obsession that she had, that also allowed her to endure all of the abuse that she received from Ray, and from all the testimonies from the kids and everything, that they concur that, hey, Sally was indeed abused, and she was abused for a long time by Ray while they lived together. So let's see. So in some instances, so we start to kind of get deep into it. I think while informing people about history is important, a lot of these shows spread a lot of misinformation, and in some cases with the families or relatives of persons in the show still alive, bring the danger of harassment or opening up, process trauma all over again. So Varder, so I'm giving you an account of what I observed. I don't think that I am making the statement that all of this evidence is true or not true. Obviously that, at the end of the day, Sally was one of the main people that was being interviewed in the entire show, so you will never be able to know exactly what happened except for the people that were involved. I just think that it was an interesting case because it does open up the conversation regarding, and I was diving into that regarding what happened, and just kind of like the trend that has been observed through the years, because it is a sad account that abuse in the household can be taken both ways. It can be something that some people hide, not just women. There are some men that also experience abuse. It's just something that can be hidden for years, and no one wants to open up and talk about it because there's a lot of negative repercussions that are believed are going to come as a result of opening up. There's also the concept of some people pretending to be abused, or making up stories in order to try to implicate their partners into the whole concept. For example, the Amber case recently is one of those examples where women can legitimately, or not just women. Let me go back on that. Women and men can both make up stories in order to try to implicate their partners into just abuse situations that did not happen, or did not happen the way that they are portrayed. So I think with these things, you have to take each case individually. I don't think that there's a blanket statement that you can make on every single case out there legitimately being hey, like every single woman out there is abused, or every single woman out there is making it up. I think it's a case by case that you have to look at, and you have to assess it by the evidence and by the occurrences and by everything else that kind of happened. I think the reason why I wanted to discuss this Netflix show is because it does open up that topic of, there are a lot of documented instances where women legitimately do end up getting sentences for defending themselves. And once they get to that level where they have to, hurt or kill their partner, they, the way that sometimes the law kind of sees these things is a little, it's interesting because, while there is legitimate self-defense, sometimes the way that it's treated in court might not necessarily point at that, and it's just an interesting conversation in general to have. There has to be a balance or calculation. Say Jack the Ripper is an interesting case where nobody's alive to feel attacked, and yet the mystery value is high and a lot of new kids don't know about it. So Again, Varder, I don't think that the show can be taken with just like an absolute fact. I think that there, and you can build your opinion on the show. I think, again, it's on Netflix. It's for entertainment value. The Zodiac Killer, for the other hand, might have to be recent. Yeah, I mean, there are some cases that people might not know about. But at the end of the day, you can kind of build your, build your facts about it. If you want to go dig deeper into it and get a lot more informed, I think you can. But again, Netflix is doing it for a business purpose of just making money and providing an entertaining show to people. But in some instances, as you go and interview some of the people that are involved, I don't think that people would just necessarily lie for entertainment value. You know what I mean? So if there's editing that kind of happens behind the scenes, that's one thing. But I don't know that people would just have to lie in order to kind of make it into a TV show. I find that kind of hard to believe in most cases. In some, you might be able to make the argument, but in most, I don't know. So we start to kind of get into the whole thing where Sally ends up finding out that Ray, she knew that there were multiple instances where Ray was cheating on her. Ray was out there. He was traveling all around the country. So, I think she definitely had suspicions, and there was definitely some evidence that he was cheating on her. And one of the last women that he ends up cheating on her with, who, again, is going to kind of tie into the happenings later on. Sally decides to, go ahead and, the way that it's portrayed is that she goes and calls the person and effectively just makes, a sort of a threat that, hey, I know who you are, and if you don't stop, reaching out to Ray, then, things are going to happen. We won't go into the details around the things. But this just kind of gives you a picture that, hey, Sally might not necessarily have been, completely docile in all of this. I think that there was just abuse back and forth, there was likely violence coming from her end as well, and again, the only people that know about it were the people that were there. At the end of the day, that's who the whole truth ends up laying on. So So it happens that on Valentine's Day, Sally goes into the whole thing where she wants to celebrate Valentine's Day with Ray, and Ray doesn't make it home. And so she spends the day with her kids, and she's kind of wandering late into the evening where Ray is at because he's not at home. Along the show, she also did mention that when Ray went into these periods of, just pure anger and just pure rage, because Ray did end up taking a lot of steroids to help him with his bodybuilding career. At the time of autopsy, when they did an autopsy on his body, they did find about 4 or 5 different steroids that he had, in his body to help. So when he gets home, Sally questions him about, where he was at, because she was about to go to the bar. I think it was called My Caves, where they would go and, kind of hang out, and that was their bar near the area. So he makes it home, and she questions him about where he was, and I don't think that Ray answered. And I believe that that was the moment where Ray, hit her again, like where he actually did a physical where he physically assaulted her again. And that's where the whole situation ends up happening, where Sally does indeed end up, killing Ray. The way that she killed him was, with a shotgun that she had in the house. She shot him once. I believe that she shot him, like in his frontal area, like his chest area, and then she shot him again after that. Now, the speculation of where Ray was when the second shot happened is, it's left to interpretation, because there's different sides to the story as to how it happened. But that was the tragedy that happened to Ray. That's where he was finally, where he had finally met his end. So let me see. I'm trying to review here, because I did end up taking some notes, just kind of help me form my thoughts. Let me see. Vardarus, what's your feedback? Saying it's on Netflix, so it's entertainment, or doesn't have to be factual, it's a bit much. I think, of course, it's an app, mostly for fun stuff, but there are also some of the greatest recent nature documentation on there, so I think we can't generalize that Netflix has a free pass on inaccuracies. With Jack the Reaper and such, there are a lot of murder that I feel documentaries would have leaning value in, but in today's day and age, the biggest enemy the internet has is missing information. So they should put at the big disclaimer that it's a dramatized version of events, or like the only inspired by it. No, so Vardarus, I think you're talking about two different things here, buddy. So I think the Dahmer show that you're talking about is heavily dramatized. So there are two shows that focus on Dahmer at the time. The first show is the one where they kind of do the reenactment of what happened, and all of the victims from Dahmer. The other one is the actual tapes that were recorded from, the psychologist and the whole entire case that happened when they were actually interviewing him. Those are two separate things. I think in some of them, it's actual documentaries, it's actual footage. It's not something that Netflix made up. It's evidence that they collected. Killer Sally was one of those series where they actually show, pictures, they show footage of like their bodybuilding, they start to, they interviewed the district attorney that actually did prosecute the case against Sally. They interviewed the kids as they became older. They interview a lot of the friends. So they did actual interviews with people that were there. Killer Sally is not a reenactment of what happened in their case. Are they going to come up with a reenactment? They might, but the show that is out there right now is not a reenactment of what happened. It's like an actual account of what Sally has testified as part of the interviewing with the documentary about the occurrences, the happenings, and they kind of dive into the history of what happened. So I think we have to keep the two separate, because it is important to say that in some of the reenactments that they do, there's dramatized content in there. There's definitely going to be made up stuff. Netflix is not going to know everything that happened, that they can't reproduce it exactly. In some cases, if they reproduced it exactly, it wouldn't be entertaining, but in some cases, they actually do end up just using the documentation and the footage, and they end up just providing you with a documentary of what happened. There are indeed multiple shows with some involving hard evidence, the other just exactly. So if you're referring to the ones where they're just like remaking it and retelling the evidence, I think you're definitely right. You have to take those with a super grain of salt, because their production level their main purpose and objective is to make sure that you are entertained with those. And then there's the other ones where there's actual footage, recordings, where they actually interview the people involved in the case. And I don't think that Netflix would have any reason to make those up. You know what I mean? So we get to the point where Ray, goes through. He passes away based on how Sally murdered him. And in her case, she called the cops. She went out, she testified to the cops, and they kind of go deep into the whole situation around how it was handled with her kids. Like her kids were definitely freaked out. Like their kids will never be able to forget that. You know what I mean? And I think one of the interesting aspects of it is just the fact that in the footage, and also based on what the district attorney commented in the show, he didn't see any sort of remorse on Sally's face at the time that she was arrested and brought in for questioning. Like the way that she gave, the happenings and the events of how things transpired. I think that after they I can't remember correctly, either they stopped interviewing her or they or they took her kids to take them to the Child Protection Services facility. She lay down on the floor and she took a nap, and she put I think her sweater on her feet, and she just took a nap. So that was the thing that drove the DA to kind of say, yeah, I don't think that she was going through that much in order for her to not show any sort of emotion around what happened. And that's where he started building his case around, that the fact that there was not a lot of going deep into the actual evidence and going deep into it. Yes, sir. We out here. Hey, yo, Sulu, welcome in, buddy. You joined in just in time for the conversation, because we're actually going to start getting deep into the Killer Sally series. And I'm telling you right now, we're going to start having a discussion around, the topic of, how some of these self-defense cases are treated, and how some women, end up facing, some of these sentences that they end up getting. But we're nearing the end of my discussion on the show. Barter says, I just read a lot of statements from people on social media and videos of the families that say they don't want this to be retold and that they're hurting all over again. So I felt like a disclaimer that this is like an imagined version of events that have helped a lot. I mean, there are legit people on Twitter that are fans of Dahmer now and feel like he was within justification based on the dramatized material. I mean, Twitter, bro, like Twitter is Twitter, dude. I mean, like you can't take people on Twitter and, it's a heavily opinionated platform. That's what I've come to find out through my interactions with Twitter. I don't think that you can just rely on what people say on Twitter as as a basis. If there are people building an opinion on the show and based on what happened and they're trying to justify what he did, I mean, the people are entitled to their opinion. You just got to be careful that those people don't actually end up doing anything that is particularly obscene with what they have learned from the show, Man, I've been holding back so hard talking about that one spike in his hairline because of the podcast. Dude, why would you bring it up, my guy? I mean, I gotta cut my hair. I haven't had time to cut my hair, dude. It's been a little turbulent couple of weeks. I actually gotta cut my hair this weekend, It is what it is. I mean, we have so much hair that we actually did end up building up a little spike in the front. But anyways, let's dive into the end of post occurrences. So the DA is going hard after Sally. There is one specific witness that ends up talking through the show, documenting the times when when Sally went over to her house, and Sally was definitely there. And she saw her with like a black eye. She saw her with like a bruised lip, or she saw her with bruises, with like a black eye. And, she definitely was going through a lot. So, her friend definitely saw instances where she definitely was abused by Ray. And on the other hand, Ray was well known in the bodybuilding scene. So when you end up just kind of going through into the building up the whole case, Ray had a lot more people testifying in his favor than Sally did. And I think that definitely did play a part within the decision. The way that the media handled this, honestly, is probably one of the most shocking things. I mean, it's shocking in a way, and also not shocking in a way, because the way that they painted Sally, they used a lot of her footage from like her wrestling videos and like all the stuff that she worked on that she produced, and they basically painted her as like this very dangerous person. And she was basically just making a living out of these videos, but the way that the media painted her, in the eyes of society that may not necessarily have been well aware of who Sally was, it definitely did a disservice to her. I think that a lot of the public opinion around her was built on what the media was saying, and it was just one of those things where, definitely, I don't know, like it may have actually painted just like a general profile around Sally, that maybe she was just violent in general, and that's why she did what she did. So Ray's so Sally had the one person that came to testify in her favor. Ray had a lot of people that testified in his favor, showing, we kind of got the idea that, hey, like the way that they talked about him, they said that they had never observed any sort of instances of him committing, abuse and things like that. But again, remember that a lot of these things were kind of done indoors, and a lot of these things were situations that friends and external people were not going to observe, because he definitely kept it, in the home. So Sally decides towards the end of the trial, and I guess maybe I should bring this up. So the way that Sally mentions having, done the shooting against Ray is that when they started to get into an altercation, she was fearful for her life at the time, and that the first time that she shot Ray, that he was still coming at her very fast, that he was not affected by the first shot, and that she had to reload the weapon quickly and then shoot him again to actually get him to stop, because she felt like she was going to be killed. The way that the district attorney provided the evidence was that the shell from the first shot actually was found in a bedroom, which would have gone against what she testified was the way that the shooting happened. And then also when he saw the evidence of just like the scene and how like the just how the particle matter from Ray was, around in the room, it didn't show, and it didn't conclude with her testimony that, the way that she had said had happened. So that definitely was another point against her. And she also testified on her behalf, and it definitely didn't help her. I think her defense attorney tried to get her to stop from testifying, and she testified anyways. And, it didn't work in her favor at all, and actually ended up hurting her in the case. So I think one of the things that is going into, so she was eventually tried based on all the evidence. She was not found guilty of first degree, but she was found guilty of second degree, and she was put on a sentence of 19 years to life. Which there was a mentioning towards the end of the show that sentences for women acting in self-defense against these kinds of situations with their partners abusing them have actually not really changed since the 90s into today, And I actually was looking into a few articles where I was reading into, some instances where women actually got sentences for having defended themselves against abuse. The question is, so I guess let's kind of dive deep into it. The first question would be, what are we observing today in terms of these kinds of things? So we're going to go ahead and kind of dive into it. So here's an article that I was looking into by Cairo 7, where there was an 80-year-old woman that was sentenced to prison for killing her abusive husband. So Barders, give me just a sec. I'll look into your questions and I'll answer them after I finish just going through these last few things. I have a few more things, and then we can get into a small conversation on that. So this first article is on an 80-year-old woman being sentenced, and I think that she got sentenced for about 8 years. She got sentenced for 8 to 10, and she actually was eligible for parole in 4. And just the way that it kind of dives into it, the woman just decided that she had enough, and she acted in self-defense against her husband. Now, the opinion on this would be that it's a person entitled to be able to defend themselves, even though they have been going through this situation for years. I think that it's difficult to prove in court if you don't have enough evidence that your life was definitely and imminently in danger. And and it's difficult for a lot of these victims. So like if we go into like another case, a Canadian court halved the prison sentence of a woman who killed her abusive husband. I guess they reviewed the case and they found that she was likely justified for doing it, but again, it's still likely first degree murder. So or at least second degree. So you're still gonna get a sentence. And when it comes down to having to do this kind of thing in order to relieve yourself, like the situation is just so severe at that point. Here's another one of a French woman. I was looking into it. I believe she only got like a year. 1 year in prison on Friday, after she endured decades of sexual, physical, and psychological abuse from her husband, who I believe was also her stepfather. So it kind of starts getting deep into like some instances. Here is, I will save that one for a bit. I was looking into that there is a pretty decent percentage of women that are, incarcerated in the U.S. and a good amount of them, I think the percentage is about 27, that are incarcerated for violent crimes in which they consider those acted in self-defense against, abusive partners as part of that percentage. Again, I think each case needs to be taken specifically, individually. I mean, I'm out here spitting bars, but each case needs to be taken individually because each case is different. So here, there is a woman that was sentenced to life in prison for convincing her boyfriend to commit murder against her husband. And the article kind of dives into the fact that she actually legitimately created like an email. She created a bunch of phony evidence in order to get her partner to do this. I don't think that the husband was abusive to her. I think she wanted to just move on with the boyfriend. Perhaps she didn't see a way out of just telling her husband like, hey, she was probably cheating on him at the time. And instead she figured that amounting phony evidence and building a case to, try to claim self-defense was the likely way to go to get out of that, to get out of the marriage that she was in. In my opinion, this is one example where it kind of hurts women who are legitimately abused out there. Women who legitimately go through abuse, who are exposed to, psychological and physical trauma for years. These kinds of things hurt the case, on the believability of different things. Like I said, that Amber's case recently is another example where you could say that, it's not that Johnny Depp didn't do anything. I mean, they found evidence that he did, but the way that she just painted him was pure defamation, and at the end of the day, Johnny was found, to not have committed most of those things, and all of the, the penalties and stuff got applied. But that's why I tend to think that you need to look at the evidence in general. And you need to assess, what the situation is. You can't just apply the same blanket statement on, hey, like all women are abused or all women are not abused and they're just making it up. It's case by case. And I think that if there is a claim from a woman that, hey, I am being abused in my household, it needs to be taken seriously. And every single piece of investigation needs to be done at a very serious level to conclude that, whether there is or there's not abuse. And it kind of goes both ways. There are some men out there that are also abused. And the same thing kind of applies. Like you should definitely be able to do an investigation, dive into the matter at a very deep level, and then assess based on the facts and the evidence, hey, there is or there is not actual abuse going on. So to conclude my thing, or just to conclude my conversation together regarding this, the series on Killer's Alley is interesting. I do encourage you guys to check it out if you guys had some time. I think it's an interesting watch because of just the way that it affected her kids. Like her kids ended up in the system. Like, both of them ended up having to grow up without parents because of what happened, and it just sucks, man. Like, it just sucks in general to see the tragedy of two people that legitimately loved each other at the beginning. I think that Ray definitely was moving on from her, and and this thing just basically could have been avoided if both of them would have just parted ways significantly sooner. But it was part of her obsession to stick with Ray no matter what, because she loved him to the full extent that she could love somebody. And so the argument becomes, and the main question from the show that has to be asked is, did Sally end up doing what she did because of the abuse that she was experiencing from Ray? Or did she do it because she knew that Ray was going to move on with a different person, and she just couldn't, bear to see that? I don't know, man. I feel like based on what I saw in the evidence and just the way that the case transpired, I don't think that you can fully trust Sally on every single statement that she makes. So I think that there's definitely some justification to say, yeah, I think she was definitely, not accepting the fact that Ray was going to move on, and that's why she did it. But there is absolutely no denial that Sally was abused. There is absolutely no going back on the fact that Sally was exposed to years and years and years of abuse by Ray, and that was something that was happening in the household, and that should have been stopped, or that should have been prevented since the very beginning. All right, so let's go back onto some of Varda's statements. I think that is the end of my bit on the show, and just like some of the articles that I looked into. Let me see. There are. Let me see. Let's see. Going back, I just read a lot of statements from people on social media and videos of the families that say they don't want this to be retold. I think I read through that one already, and that they're hurting all over again. So I felt like a disclaimer that this is an imagined version of events would have helped. There are legit people on Twitter that are fans of Dahmer now and feel like he was within justification based on the dramatized material. That's also a problematic thing, though. I'm sure in today's day and age, it doesn't happen that much anymore. But that they build a case around her not looking that emotional is like weird. Shock and loss transpire different in people. Yeah, like the district attorney, I think he just kind of went for the fact that just based on what he saw on the footage when they were doing the interviewing, and just based on everything, all of the evidence, like he didn't see any remorse whatsoever coming from her, and that's why he went after the case as hard as he did. And he was also known to be one of the hardest pursuing prosecutors around that age, around that time period. So that definitely did not help her case either, that he was definitely a very aggressive DA, So all of that combined contributed to the sentence that she got. Those cases are always hard. Look at the Johnny Depp thing. They showed so much footage that was just like cut out of context to paint a picture, and back in the day as a woman to prove that your husband was the evil man. Those must have been so hard. What is your opinion on prisons? Like, do you feel prisoners deserve rights? Like 110% proven rapists and murderers. Asking because the other day I've seen some of us political whine about some relative of hers working for low pay within a prison. I think that based on the crime that you do, if it's a crime that definitely hurts society, like for example, like a person committing physical abuse against young children, I don't think that those people deserve rights, man. I'm sorry. I think that you're definitely going to be guaranteed your constitutional rights, because the Constitution is like the sacred document in the U.S. So you're gonna have rights, but I feel like there should be some exceptions to the rule, man. I feel like if you're legitimately hurting other people's lives and you're marking them for life, I don't think that you really deserve to have any sort of rights, although you are guaranteed them because of the Constitution. That's my thought of it. But it's a case by case basis because of what occurs. It definitely hurts the credibility for sure. The thing is, every act should be investigated based on facts and not talked down. Exactly. You should gather all of the evidence, all of the facts, and you should look at everything collectively, and then based on that, you can make a determination as to whether there is or there is not abuse happening. You know what I mean? Like every single case should be taken seriously. Every single case should be investigated. And it shouldn't be generalized, because I think we're doing a massive wrong by just generalizing some of these things and just saying, hey, like, I think it did happen, and then not look into the evidence and everything that is there. Take Brendan Fraser, for example. He was a man at his prime in movies, but then he was sexually harassed by a director, like inappropriate touches and stuff that he said no to and refused, and then reported, and he was laughed at and blacklisted from Hollywood, what led him falling into substance abuse. Yeah, like in some, there could be some evidence really that there is a lot of there's inner circles that definitely end up protecting themselves. I'm not going to say that Hollywood is one of those internal circles. I'm not going to say that there are any that I know of specifically, but there could be, and legitimately, there could be internalizing of these happenings in order to just protect themselves, because there's more than one member that has, been a culprit of all these things. Just like Terry Crews, male on male sexual assault, and it's so fucking weird how normal it is. Wait, what? Terry suffered it, or Terry did it? I had not heard anything from Terry Crews, man. So like, did he suffer it, or was he the one that was doing it? Not exactly. Once you mark down as a felon in the U.S., a few of your rights are stripped. Can no longer own a weapon, and you have to register, have signs on your door, lawn advertising that you're an insert felon crime here. Sex offenders are, for example, all must be registered. There's actually an argument right now, Karen, that is going on, where they're trying to take that initiative away, where a person should not be registered as an offender in that department. It's something I believe that is going around right now. It makes no fucking sense to me that you commit a crime like that and then people shouldn't know about you and what you did. But I believe, if I'm not wrong, I believe that's one of the things that's going around right now, where like people are saying like, yeah, I don't think it should be, I don't think it should be something that you register for. I highly disagree with that. But then again, it's something that I've heard. Let me see if I can find something. Give me just a sec. I think I had heard about something. I might be wrong. I mean, don't document me on this. Rawr. Hey, yo, Fleming Hales, welcome in tonight. How you doing? Thank you so much for dropping by on this interesting conversation that we're having. Terry's director sexually assaulted the dude. That sucks, man. Holy crap, man. Terry Crews is such a nice person too, bro. Like I definitely feel for Terry. I feel like if you plan and executed a plan to murder or hurt somebody cold-blooded, you should automatically forfeit your right to complain about what happens to your life after that. It depends on the severity, Barters. I mean, the thing about, the justice system is that you need to have evidence that directly, aligns you with the specific charge. So when you are a prosecutor and you are looking to, lead a case, I think one of the biggest considerations that you need to have is what the charges are that you're applying to the person that you're prosecuting. You can't just apply any charge, because if the evidence that is available does not align to the charge, then the case gets dismissed and the person gets to go away, get away with it. Fleming Hales opened up a soda chest, and she has revealed an interesting conversation about Killer Sally. Thank you so much for dropping by today, Fleming. Really appreciate you. How was your weekend, by the way? And have you been able to get a new car after what recently happened with your old car? Hopefully you've been able to find a car out there and get rolling around again. It might take some time, but I'm hoping that you have already found a new car. But to conclude today's conversation and to jump into some Overwatch, I think it's interesting to watch it. I think it's interesting to kind of listen to the evidence. I think that the question is still going to be one that is kind of open, because I don't think that there's any hardcore evidence that proves either Sally did it because she was legitimately scared for her life, or Sally did it because she was jealous and she didn't want Ray moving on. I couldn't find any hardcore evidence that proves one or the other. I think it's a completely opinionated, conclusion that someone can arrive. But definitely worth a watch, guys. And I think, just kind of talking about this, it is sad, man, to watch some of these women that end up going through, instances of abuse with their partners and then having to resort to these very drastic measures in order to find relief. They end up getting prison sentences for things that in some eyes could be just justified. Like, I've endured abuse for years. I was just tired of it. I feel like it was going to kill me. So, I did what I did. But it's very difficult to prove it, because a lot of these people just don't go out and document the occurrences of abuse and assault. So it is kind of unfair what happens, but it was just an interesting watch. And again, I just wanted to portray it to you guys. And if you guys want to check it out more in detail and build your own opinion, you guys are more than welcome to. But that's going to be, let's see. There is like an old proverb that goes something like, if you seek revenge, dig two graves, one for yourself. Yeah, I mean, I can definitely see that, Barteris. So thank you guys for the conversation and for the inputs, and that's going to be it on this segment. And let's go ahead and move on to our next topic, Overwatch 2.